Coming up in today's episode, we are looking at the field of occupational psychology. I am joined by a guest who is just coming to the very end of the process in qualifying in this fascinating career that bridges the gap between the workplace and human behaviour. Whether you are listening because you are looking for a career change or maybe looking to dive in at an earlier stage of your career, then you are in the right place. We look at the key aspects of this career, how to get started, how to get qualified, and so much more. Hope you find it so useful. Hi, welcome along to the Aspiring Psychologist podcast. I am Dr. Marianne Trent and I'm a qualified clinical psychologist. One of the joys of creating this podcast is that I'm able to illuminate different facets of professional psychology careers. And I wanted to revisit in more detail something that we spoke about with Dr. Mari Kovanen when we were looking at a variety of issues, including growing up in Finland and looking at dating in psychology and occupational psychology. But I wanted to dedicate a whole episode to occupational psychology, which is what we are doing today. It's going to be really useful for you, whatever stage of career you are at, and whether you are interested in occupational psychology or not. I think there's something to be gained by listening to it or watching it. That said, if you are watching on YouTube, please do subscribe, like, share the content, drop me a comment below. In the episode, we do talk about whether there is funding available for student finance, and my guest wasn't quite sure of the answer. I've had a little bit of a Google, and it looks like the best thing to do is to contact the student finance department in the country that you are living in. So I'm in England. For me, it would be Student Finance England, because it seems to be done on a case-by-case basis depending on what stage of career you are at and whether you've had previous funding. I would love to know what you think of this episode. I hope you find it so useful. I will catch up with you on the other side. I just want to welcome along our guests for today. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Marianne. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, thank you so much for saying yes. So we got chatting on LinkedIn and I was like, would you fancy coming on and doing a podcast episode? And thankfully you said yes.
I did, and that's one of my. I like saying yes to lots of things. So that's one of my potential pitfalls. But yes, I was really excited about this. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for squeezing me in at a time when actually you're quite busy anyway, because you've just been telling me that you're kind of coming to the end stages of getting everything sorted so that you can call yourself an occupational psychologist, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Yes. So in fact, I've just spent this morning finishing off my amends to submit my thesis to the examiners so I can get that rubber stamped. And then that kind of closes that journey, which has been an amazing journey. I'm really obviously looking forward to sharing some of it with you today.
Oh, congratulations in advance. And tell us a little bit about how did you come to doing this particular field in psychology?
Yeah, I mean, I know everyone's got an interesting story, so I'm a little bit biased in saying that mine's super interesting, but I guess it's interesting in that there was quite a significant career transition. So I spent the first almost 20 years of my career in sales and marketing, and a very traditional career in terms of, looking for promotions. It was that traditional kind of vertical, linear type career in sales and marketing. And got to a point where, I was marketing director, sales responsibility across Europe, big team, everything I'd always wanted. But something, it wasn't really. So I got there and then went, oh, actually, this isn't really what I want to do anymore. Also at the time, from a contextual perspective, I had a small child. I was trying to be this great mum, trying to be this great boss, trying to be superwoman in all domains. And, that then kind of started having some consequences for my well-being. And I recognized that and decided to take charge and do something different. So I exited my corporate career, as I said, after almost 20 years. And started off my own consultancy. And actually in those first couple of years, it was a marketing consultancy. I just took, this is what I do, this is what I'm good at, and brought it into consulting. then I started finding a lot of the work I was doing was using some of my kind of leadership skills that I'd kind of developed over my corporate career, doing leadership work, doing management change projects, helping organizations going through change. And I started kind of realizing this is quite different, but this is what I really like. And that's when I started exploring opportunities to actually, build my credentials through education. So that's when I started looking at courses that would enable me to be better at that, be more informed, use evidence-based practice as opposed to just going out on the whim. And that's when I came across the masters in organisational psychology at Birkbeck.
Amazing. So you decided to take the plunge.
I took the plunge, went back to studying after 22 years. My undergraduate degree was in social science. I majored in economics and sociology, so I don't have a psychology degree. Well, kind of do now, but so I didn't, it was more of a social science. So I enrolled on the organisational psychology master's program at Birkbeck. I did it full time in a year because I was so desperate to learn it all really quickly. In hindsight, that might not have been the best idea, but that's the route I took. And then I got to near the end, and I was just in a bit of a, I love this journey. I love this. I love it. I just find this so fascinating. I don't want it to stop. And obviously, because I'd chosen full time, it was coming to an end, and I wasn't really ready for it to end. And so I recall talking to our professor of our department at the time saying, how do I carry on this? And it was just very fortuitous at the time. Birkbeck were bringing the professional doctorate in occupational psychology to fruition. And I was advised that might be a nice route, because I kind of wanted to work in practice as a practitioner, independent practitioner. So I applied for that and managed to actually coerce one of my friends who's also on the MSc to do it, so we could do it together. And we both got accepted. So we handed in our master's dissertations, and a week later we were enrolled on the professional doctorate. And that was back in 2019.
Gosh, that's amazing. Amazing, excellent timing, but you're clearly the right candidates for those roles as well. Tell us a little bit about the professional doctorate. So how big are the cohorts? Do you get paid to train? Do you have to pay tuition fees?
Yes, so you do have to pay, and it's something in the region of about £5,000 a year. So there's obviously a cost there. You are working while you're doing it, because actually the part one, so if you don't already have the BPS chartership, if you're going in it from scratch, as I was, the part one is you are working and you are then doing reflective learning logs based on the piece of work. And obviously, if you're fortunate enough, you will be getting paid for that work. Because I'm an independent practitioner, I did a little mixture. Some projects I was getting paid for, other projects I had to do pro bono, simply because I had to do the piece of work, and it was during COVID, so you had to kind of make some decisions around, okay, I'll have to do some stuff and not get paid for it in order to get the qualification. So there was a little bit of a mix. You kind of cover 5 main areas. So selection and assessment, engagement and motivation, leadership, change, and then learning and development. Those were the 5 topic areas. And so you do a meaty piece of work within that domain, and then you write up a sort of 5,000 word reflective log on using the consultancy cycle as the kind of framework, evidence-based practice, to demonstrate that you have delivered work to the standard of a doctoral student.
Amazing, thank you. So there's those 5 key areas, but the one thing that I felt like I knew about occupational psychology wasn't there. So
oh really?
Or maybe I'm just not fitting it in. So I think the only teaching I've ever had on it was when we were doing a module or looking at sick building syndrome, which is like when whole workforce became ill because of the way the building was kind of set up, and it just wasn't making people feel good and wasn't kind of ergonomic or wasn't autonomous for human functioning. So I kind of thought that was kind of partly the role of occupational psychology, but
yeah, and
maybe
well, in
completely
fact,
misguided.
there is actually a sixth area, which is well-being. So there is a well-being area. So some of my peers did their focus on well-being initiatives. So that's my mistake. I should have said that. So well-being is quite a. In fact, I did my master's on that, so I should have known that.
No worries at all. So do you have like a favorite area? Do you have like a dream piece of work that you like to do in occupational psychology?
So my area of interest is motivation at work, and my doctoral research, my thesis was in proactive behaviour at work, which is around self-initiated, change-oriented, future focus, about challenging the status quo. So it's that kind of behaviour that drives change, and that's I identify as having a proactive personality. So it was an area I was particularly interested in, as a lot of doctoral students do the thing that they kind of can relate to and want to understand a bit more about themselves. It's a bit of a sort of journey of discovery. And that's my area that I found really fascinating. I teach on the employee relations and motivation module at Birkbeck now. So I teach on the master's program now. So it's kind of gone full circle. And I'm an accredited coach, so I particularly like doing work where I'm coaching clients who feel a bit stuck, they're procrastinating, can't see a way forward. That's kind of when someone comes to me with that as a coaching dilemma, I'm like, yes, this is the thing I love doing. So all things related to motivation, I find very motivating, and so that's my sort of thing I'm super interested in. But I'm also really interested in leadership and, the impact of leaders, having experienced some great leadership, having experienced some not so great leadership, and having been in a leadership role and wanting to be a really good leader. So that's also something that I'm fascinated by, and it links with motivation to a certain degree.
Yeah, I guess nothing like working in business and seeing things done well or seeing things done really badly to inspire you to be the difference that makes the difference.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so now you are pretty much almost qualified, because I say 99% kind of just waiting for the rubber stamping. Are you going to be working just in a self-employed capacity, kind of looking for contracts? Do people sometimes employ occupational psychologists in an employed capacity? How does it work?
Yeah, so I'll share kind of my personal experience, but mine is quite different to others. So I am, as I said, independent practitioner. So I've got my own consultancy, and I have what's called a portfolio career. So within that, I have my independent consultancy work. So I do some coaching, I do leadership development, I pick up nice little strategic projects. I've done sort of stuff around change, engagement, culture stuff. So they're kind of tend to be kind of bespoke. It's it's a short project, or it can be longer. So that's my kind of consultancy stuff. Coaching, as I said, I work directly with clients, coaching clients. I also do quite a lot of teaching, coaching basics to leaders, so enable organizations to have kind of leaders as coach type programs. So I do quite a lot in terms of very sort of simplified coaching. And then I have some jobs where it's more kind of paid for roles. So I'm a non-exec director for Southern Co-op. So that's a regional cooperative. And I sit on that board, but I'm also the board ambassador for DE&I. I chair the remuneration committee. So some of the strengths from what I do overlays there. And then, as I mentioned, I teach at Birkbeck on the master's program.
Oh, a little bit of variety is definitely the spice of life, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So yeah.
And you mentioned that you really like change. And for many of our listeners or watchers, they might be thinking about the kind of stages of change model, which is that Prochaska and DiClemente? Have I imagined that? I don't know.
I
But
think there's quite a few. I mean, Kubler-Ross is one that's cited often, which is the one that's associated to the grief model. I mean, there's questionable evidence around it, but I know it's one that often gets used in a work context to talk around change. That's from a kind of people experiencing change and navigating change, but then there's a whole ton of change frameworks in terms of the most optimal model of implementing a change at work. And fun enough, one of my projects on my part one was looking at all the different change models and actually trying to get the best out of and come up with something that was the most helpful. So there's lots of different theories of change.
So there's stuff that's a little bit more in depth than the, what is it, contemplation, pre-contemplation, action, maintenance, all of that.
I think the most effective kind of frameworks are those that actually recognize, going back to the context and the importance of participation and the importance of kind of getting buy-in and involvement, those kind of, and communication. Because one thing I've kind of learned over the years is that when change is done badly, normally at the root cause is the communication is poor. And so the communication is kind of at the heart of everything.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you look at kind of the way that staff teams function. So, we'll have all worked in some that work really well and others that just don't. Is that kind of something that occupational psychologists could get in there and sort out to help teams to thrive?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, depending on the pathway you sort of choose to go down, because I said it is quite interesting. I've got friends who 100% work in selection and assessment. That's what they do. They do psychometrics. It's about recruitment, selection, assessment, finding the best people for roles. And that in itself is very specialized. And then I've got other peers who work fundamentally, in change, whether that's change management, helping through change, navigating change, all the change type stuff. I've got other colleagues who do stuff that's more around well-being initiatives, well-being interventions. So it kind of depends which kind of pathway you decide to go down. I've kind of, because I kind of like, as you've probably realized, have my fingers in lots of pies. I kind of like, I'm more interested in someone comes and says what the challenge is, and I kind of go, am I the right person? Have I got some knowledge in this? Do I understand it? Can I get to the bottom of it? And then I'll be like, yeah, that sounds like something I could get involved in. So yes, but there are sort of I don't know if I've answered that very well, have I? I've kind of felt like I've digressed a bit.
No, absolutely fine. So it sounds kind of, I don't know, like it reminds me a little bit of forensic, where you kind of have to hold yourself accountable, get everything done, and keep hoping to move through the process at the right time. Is there like a pathway that you kind of start on the doctorate and then 3 years later you are spat out if you've kind of met all the thresholds, or is it a little bit more piecemeal than that?
I think the interesting thing specifically with the professional doctorate at Birkbeck, most people on it have had quite a bit of work experience, so we're already in work, or have like me, was on a second career. So and because of the nature of the part one, that you are doing work related projects, you have to have access to those work. As I said, some of my peers were employed, some within kind of just citing some of the individuals, but someone who they worked in selection assessment, that's pretty much what they did. Someone else who is mainly doing wellbeing initiatives in NHS. So it kind of it depends on kind of individuals, but that idea that it's more linked to their context in which you're operating, whether you're or an independent practitioner or whether you're employed. And then because it's quite a long journey, I've got obviously peers as well who've who've moved companies, they're doing different things. Because you're kind of doing it alongside working, everyone's path is going to be different, essentially.
I see. Thank you. And obviously, if the circumstances for the person are right and they've not had too much funding before, can they apply for kind of student loan things to kind of help with their fees and things?
No, I was in a position to be able to self-fund, and because I was working for the duration, I was obviously earning whilst doing. So it is classed as a part-time. So I was doing this and pretty much working at times full-time as well. So.
And how old is your youngest child now? How many years has it taken from when you first thought, not sure this is working?
Yeah, well, she's just turned 13, actually. So she's a teenager.
Oh,
she was about, she was 4 when I left my corporate role. And so for the last 5.5 years, I've been, a student and working at the same time. So yes, I'm now a mum of a teenager, which is a bit scary.
Amazing. I'm sort of hovering at the preteen. I've got a 10.5-year-old that it's like, it's a whole different ball game. But
my gosh,
that sense of you almost on this precipice of like, I think I'm going. Yep, I'm gonna jump off. I'm quitting this corporate life and I'm gonna do something different, which is exhilarating but also terrifying.
Yeah, although I do remember at the time, I mean, as I kind of alluded to, I was absolutely going down a pathway to burnout. That's where I was headed. I was overworking. I was working, as I said, big role, European responsibility, large team, and working in 3 different time zones. So, and with a propensity to say yes to too much. Now that I know that, that was a pathway I was headed down. So actually, when I, got off the conveyor belt, it was such a relief because I think I knew where I was headed, had I not. So it was a much needed. I remember at the time having this kind of feeling, just my weight lifted and being able to kind of suddenly be creative because I'd come out of this kind of hamster wheel of busyness, which was not serving me well.
Yeah, I think it's amazing what a difference it can make to us physically and in terms of our mental load as well when we make a decision and we take action and it seems like we're doing like a purposeful goal. Then I remember when I was trying to decide whether or not to stop working for the NHS, and the mental load was so heavy. Anytime I had a spare couple of minutes, I'd be trying to weigh it up, like, should I stay? Should I go? Like literally every time I went to boil the kettle, that's what I found myself thinking about. And it's just really hard. And once I'd made that decision, I did just feel so liberated and free and excited. Not because the NHS is a bad place to work for, but for me, I'd made my decision and, they're really empowering.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like taking control is one of your key tips for reducing burnouts in the psychology sphere, but it might not be your only one. Have you got any other kind of ideas for how that can be prevented?
Yes, I was appreciated you mentioning that this might be a question because I really did reflect on this because I think it was at this almost as I said heading down that pathway. That was, I think, one of the reasons, this interest in organizational psychology, knowing that this is, work intensification is a real thing, and knowing that actually I can make a difference to workplaces by bringing some of my experience and then newly acquired knowledge to help kind of educate and help people kind of think differently about how they approach work. As I said, I am naturally someone who has a propensity to do too much, to say yes to too many things. If something sounds really exciting, I'm like, oh yeah, I could do that. And it's been a real kind of challenge and experience, learning experience to try and recognize that actually I need to be better at being more boundaried. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, is that I absolutely, during my corporate career, did not operate with boundaries. Someone sends me an email in an evening and I'm sitting, my phone's there, so I might as well reply. Why not? And so that idea of not having any kind of thought around, well, one, what am I doing? Why am I replying to an email at 10 o'clock at night? And two, what message is that sending out as that? Well, I think that this is okay. So I think that idea of being boundaried around when we communicate, and lots of people say, oh, but that's the time that suits me. It's like, that's great, but actually, what message are you sending out? So I think that whole thing around being boundaried around when we should and shouldn't be working and communicating, the sort of digital switch off, being more boundaried around going with my family. This is not time to have my phone attached to my, waiting for the next message. So I think there's lots around that kind of, and it does actually help. I don't know if you find the same as being a parent. It does kind of help when you've got a dependence, because you kind of say, actually, no, I want to be a really good mom, so I am going to switch this off at this time. I think having my daughter has enabled me to be a bit more boundaried that I wasn't before. So I think there's definitely something around that. My top tip, that I've only just started implementing it, but I felt quite empowered when I did it recently. So as I said, when people come to me with opportunities, I always think, oh, that sounds really exciting. I think I'd really enjoy that. Yes. And then kind of look at my diary and go, oh my gosh, why did I say that? So I've got a new thing, which is I say, can I get back to you on that? Or let me think about that. And I benefit from having a husband who's well boundaried, who I then have the kind of come back to you on it. I'll say to him, he's like, of course, why are you saying yes to that? You've got tons of things on. So I have a kind of voice of reason shouting at me. But also just having that time to then go, right, I know this is really exciting. This sounds really great. But what else have you got going on? What is going to be the impact if you do that? And then going back and then saying, actually, thank you so much for the offer, but based on what else I've got on right now, I can't do it. Or saying, actually, yeah, I'm going to do it, but it comes with these caveats. So that is quite new. It's quite new.
I feel like I am one of the first people to have experienced that, because you did that to me. You were like, let me have a look, let me have a research, let me think about it and come back to you. And, I really appreciated that. I want you to feel like you're choosing to do this and that you feel like it's a worthwhile thing to do. But it's absolutely okay to ask for more information, to ask for some time to think, to kind of look at the diary, to plan when you might be able to do that. Yeah, and I think it's really common, especially in aspiring psychologists. You want to be keen, you want to get things done, you want to say yes, 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 yes. But then if it means that you are over full, you've got too much in your diary, you can't do it all, and that will be a path to burnout. So learning to say no, or, if you don't necessarily want to say no to your supervisor, to say, could you help me look at my diary to think about the things that are most pressing in terms of priority, so that we can make sure that everything gets done in a way that meets your needs and mine.
Yeah, I think, and generally because I do a lot of work with leaders, and I'm really picking up this kind of propensity to say yes, propensity to not question deadlines, to propensity to assume everything's urgent when it's not, propensity to assume everything's important when it's sometimes not. And this idea of kind of saying not yet, or no, or can I think about it, it is empowering. And I think initially people kind of think, oh, what might others think of me if I say that? And I think it's this kind of notion of fearing social judgment of, what people are going to think. Are they going to think I'm not coping very well? Are they going to think I'm not very good at prioritizing? Honestly, from my experience, I find you get actually more kudos and respect when you are actually demonstrating I'm in control and I'm telling you what my capacity is. So I think it is something that, a lot of employees and leaders in organizations can kind of learn from.
Absolutely. So important. Thanks for sharing that with us. So, people are listening to this podcast or watching it at all stages of their life, all stages of their career. If they're like listening to this thinking, oh, That sounds like a bit of me. What's the best thing that they should do in terms of trying to move their career forward?
So I think first and foremost, if it depends obviously on your kind of age and stage, but if you've not already got a master's in organisational psychology, that is really, or occupational psychology, that is really the first step. I guess for those who have a psychology background, that's an easier route in, but you can get on an MSc occupational organisational psychology without having an undergraduate degree in psychology. So that's good news if there's aspiring psychologists who haven't got the undergrad, because I didn't. It might mean it's a slightly steeper learning curve, but that's okay. So the kind of the MSc is kind of the pathway in, because that then gives you, organizational psychologist kind of credentials. And then as to kind of how you want to take that, I know lots of my students who have done their masters and are, that's where they want to kind of end the education, but are doing, really thriving in various different jobs. As I said, it's so interesting because you can have someone who's working for a management consultancy doing change stuff. You've got someone over here is working for recruitment in psychometrics and selection. You've got someone over here who's working for, a consultancy who do wellbeing initiatives. It's so varied. I think that's the part. And if you're interested in work, if you're interested in the world of work, you can kind of find your passion and interest in many different kind of domains, and they require very different skills. So I think that's why it's quite a broad kind of domain.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge and expertise with us today. Where should people come and follow you? Is LinkedIn the best place to contact you or reach out or just be inspired by your wonderful work and posts?
Oh yes, probably LinkedIn's a good place. I try to share content on there. I'll do a quick plug. I'm actually writing a book now, so but it's quite early doors. But hopefully this time next year, my book will soon be published. So my research interest in proactive behaviour at work has led to an opportunity to write in that area. So I'm working on a business book that's around how leaders can create the right conditions for proactive behaviour at work to flourish. So that's what I'm going to be writing over the coming weeks and months. My LinkedIn posts are going to be sharing more around my own research in proactive behaviour. So if you're interested in proactive behaviour motivation, then I'll be feeding more insights over the coming weeks and months, mainly on LinkedIn.
So you are Joe Gray on LinkedIn, doctor in occupational psychology, it says there. And I will look forward to learning more about you and your book. And if you wanted to come back on and talk to us about that at any stage, when the time is right, please let us know. But yeah, I was thinking when you were saying, people decide when they get to MSc that they're just going to stop. And I was thinking, often we think we're done and we're not. Like I was thinking, whenever I finish a book, I think I'm done. I'm never doing that again. And you finish some education, you think I'm never doing that again. And then you're like, I might just do this thing. It's funny
business.
that you've already got a thing.
Yes, I know. Do you know what? I was mindful that, because lots of people said that when you come to the end of like a PhD or doctorate, you're almost like that. Oh, and that's it. I've reached it. And I ran a few marathons in the past, and I have had post-marathon blues. We were a bit like, what now? So actually the book was a really nice little next thing, so that I didn't have that big dip of what next. So I proactively set that up.
Oh, well, I hope that it goes really well for you, and I hope that your amendments get signed off with no problem and you enjoy your career as an occupational psychologist.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thanks to everyone for listening. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. What a lovely conversation it was with Joe. Please do go and follow her on LinkedIn. She is Joe Gray over there. There will be details in the show notes. Whilst you're at it, come and connect with me as well. I am Dr. Marianne Trent on all of my socials, and you can also come and join the Aspiring Psychologist Community free Facebook group. And you can also, if you would like to, consider joining the Aspiring Psychologist membership so that I can help you with your next rung on your ladder. Thank you so much for being part of my world. I will look forward to catching up with you for the next episode of the Aspiring Psychologist podcast, which will be along to you very soon. Take care.